Hello and welcome to Paradox, Untold Stories from Athletic Directors with Dr. Danielle Lapointe and Dr. Dustin Smith. We have some crazy and unique stories for you, which are made possible by our sponsor, Wall of Fame. At the Wall of Fame, our mission is to bring your school's legacy to life. We transform school tributes to make it easier than ever to celebrate your whole community, showcasing your school's diverse history, proudest moments, and top role models. We understand that the true value of our Wall of Fame is in your content. Whether you are starting a new tribute or adding to an existing one, we give you all the resources you need to build an interactive experience and take your content to the next level. Speaking of next level, let's check in to see what Danielle and Dustin have for us today.
Hello, everyone. We have an exciting episode for you today. We are going to welcome Kyle Lemieux. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We are very excited to have you here today. From Wisconsin, we've had a couple of Wisconsin guests, and I love working with Wada out there. But Dustin, how are you doing over there today?
And I'm living the dream in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, just having a good day. It's cloudy out, but man, I'm excited to bring some energy and have some fun here with Kyle. I've gotten to know him through our cohort. He's a member of the NIAAAU cohort this year, going through the executive leadership cohort. And now this may be a couple firsts that we have. One, I don't know that we've ever had an associate principal on as a guest, so he shares that role with his athletic director duties. But Kyle, I just want to ask from the get go, what does associate principal mean?
That's a great question. Yeah, it means that I do whatever anybody else tells me to do. No, I wear these crazy dual hats where no 2 days are the same, but I get to take a swipe at student discipline. So, for example, I have letters S through Z. I'm sitting in IEP meetings this morning. I was in a couple of social studies classes. I work with our student services department, attendance, all these other things. So, it's kind of like living a double life because I'm fully immersed in that aspect of our work. So we have 1,200 students here at Waukesha West. So an admin team of 4, including our principal and me and 2 others. And so there's, for this ship to stay afloat, we're doing a lot of shared responsibilities, and so that becomes part of it. So once upon a time when I started this, they said, I think the AD duties will be 60% and those AP duties will be 40%. I'm not so sure that is accurate. And my running joke is that there's a lot of days that feel like it's 100, 100, and the calendar just explodes. But yeah, so that's, in our district, the way that we move leaders around, I kind of go off the idea of I'm an administrator, I'm an associate principal that happens to be in charge of the world of athletics.
And you haven't always been in an athletic director role. You've worked your way through maybe even a non-traditional path of coming out of school. So talk a little bit about your path to the chair as an athletic administrator.
Yeah, so I was definitely always one of those guys growing up. I was the kid of 2 teachers, and so the education path was just kind of, hey, this is what we'll do. Started in physical education, and of course, you're out hunting for that first job, and you're going to hope that somebody's willing to pay you for this whole teaching thing, right? So started in elementary PE land for a few years. I was a baseball coach during that time, and with some overlap, I was hired as a head varsity coach that happened to lead me to a role at a different high school, actually across town. And all during that time, I also happened to be doing my master's program to get my licensure. And then, sure enough, the May that I finished my licensure, there were a few jobs that opened up, and one was the school that I was at as just an associate principal role. And I thought, well, all right, this is it. Like, I'm this is a little sooner than I thought. I mean, I was a young guy. I was 28 at the time. Like, I even remember asking my current principal that I'm like, what do you think? Like, if you tell me no, that's okay. Like, I get it. Like, I need to kind of learn and grow and do these things. And I was encouraged to apply, and that was great. And it just so happened that I didn't finish number one in that, but I think that was an incredible blessing because through that process, the people over here were like, "Hey, you didn't apply over here," and my response was something to the effect of, well, yeah, it's Waukesha West. Like, I don't think you're looking for me. And sure enough, a few weeks later, we're going through the interview process, and here we are. So going into my 12th year in this role, I've apparently fooled enough people that I've stayed here wearing blue. So
Now, I mentioned early that there's a couple of firsts. One, an associate principal we haven't had, but two, I don't know how many schools or how many guests we've had that have had alpine skiing and snowboarding as sport offerings for their schools. So talk about those, and maybe because I'm from Oklahoma and in the South and Danielle's in Florida, may not be a common theme, but you have that common theme in having some alpine skiing and snowboarding as interscholastic sports.
we do, and so they I would say, and it's funny that you say, obviously in Wisconsin you associate like the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, right? And it's always cold here. It was 85 degrees here yesterday, and so it's we're going through the highs and lows too. But Friday night football, I'm sure I'm going to be wearing a winter hat because it's supposed to drop like 30 degrees, right? But yeah, so ski and snowboard, they've been and technically still are. They're not part of our state association, but they're club sports status. And so, similar to other sports like lacrosse was for a long time, it's finally this year becoming part of the Wisconsin Association tournament series. I would put bowling in that category too, where we kind of have this dynamic of we have so many kids who are doing these things. We have this group that looks like they represent us, talks like they represent us, right? They kind of have that feel. So we should probably jump in and make sure that we are, providing the right oversight and making this happen the way it should. And so, sure enough, we have snowboarders that qualify for state and national competitions and alpine skiers. And if you watch even like the state competitions, the way that they broadcast them, it looks like you're watching the Olympics. I mean, it's really cool. So yeah, I think Wisconsin is interesting because you say we have all 4 seasons, and the unique part about Wisconsin is you can experience all 4 seasons probably within the same couple of weeks. The way that it goes back and forth sometimes, and so it's do we have those like dog days of winter? Sure, but it's interesting how it comes and goes. But yeah, so with snowboard and ski, those programs have now blossomed into groups that are 30 plus kids, and in a school of 1,200, I mean, that overtakes some of our more traditional programs. So it's good stuff. Yeah, they have great people, great coaches at the reins there. So exciting to see that grow for sure.
In Arkansas, we had trap shooting, which was through the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. It wasn't sanctioned by the Arkansas Activities Association, but it was similar to what you're talking about in snowboarding and alpine skiing. But it was unique to Arkansas. They were having trap shooting. They have state, and they do their competitions that were not. They still fell under athletics, but it wasn't under the umbrella of the Arkansas Activities Association, which was unique for the state of Arkansas. So I can relate to that.
Sure.
I think those opportunities are just great for kids in general. I went to high school in New York, and we had ski club. So we like every Wednesday we would get on, a bus. They would take us up to the mountain, and we would go skiing all night, and they would, bus us back late. And it was not like a competitive thing.
Sure.
But I absolutely loved it, right? And you're exposed to all of these new things that you're doing. So I just think the more activities that we give kids, whether there's a state series or not, is great. So I love hearing that for sure.
Yeah, ice fishing, is that something that would be on the radar for Wisconsin?
We definitely have fishing club, and they are brave enough to endure all weather, and so
all elements.
A couple days a week, even right now, they're getting out on different lakes and areas, and sure enough, they will definitely be ice fishing this winter. So,
have you ever ice fished?
I haven't. Like, I don't know if I'm a true Wisconsinite in a lot of senses. Like, I don't really fish. I don't hunt. Right? I don't own a gun. There's a lot of stereotypes that I probably don't fit. Maybe my accent is thick enough to carry the day across all of those stereotypes. I don't know, but yeah. So I don't think I fit maybe that traditional mold. But you probably wouldn't want me with a gun in my hands or a fishing pole in my hand. Frankly, we'll see. But my kids love it, so I'm happy for them.
Well, let's talk about what we like to do is just we've kind of touched on a few things about what you do in the workplace, but let's talk about what's life like not as the athletic administrator or associate principal. As you know, you said it's 100 and 100. I
Yep.
mean, sometimes you are locked in on both of them, but what does Kyle like to do outside of work for fun? What's the resume not tell us about who Kyle Lemieux is?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, I'm super lucky. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Bethany. We're coming up on 18 years and actually just a couple weeks here. And so we've got 3 kids, an 8th grade boy, a 6th grade daughter, and then a 4th grade son. And they, like most households, they are what the entire schedule revolves around, right? So I obviously love coaching and love sport given the profession that I'm in. I also prefer to control the chaos and control the crazy, which means that a lot of their teams I end up being coach, right? So, for example, right now, my oldest son, I'll have a U14 baseball team for him, and then my youngest, a U10 team. I am the head coach of both of those. And so if you looked at our family calendar from beginning of April to the end of July, there's probably 4 or 5 days in there that don't have baseball. So that's good, but everything else is. And miraculously, the last 2 summers, if you add it all up, it's probably, I don't know, 130, 140 games, right? Just as many practices. We've had something along the lines of 5 days where we've had an overlap, where I've had to go to the younger team coaches and say, hey, sorry, guys, I can't be here for this one, right? And it's usually because we're in the same tournament or something and we have a overlapping bracket play, whatever it might be. So, having been a varsity coach, but now entering into this role, and part of entering into this role was giving up my coaching duties and being able to, kind of set that aside for now. I always joke that I treat 10-year-olds and 14-year-olds like they're varsity athletes now, and so just get to get after it with them. Starting in a couple weeks, my daughter, she's playing some 6th grade junior hoops in our program, and so sure enough, I'll find my way to the bench with her. Yeah, I mean, they play football. My daughter's going to play softball. There's a lot of things like many sporty families that we're involved in, but our family also loves just downshifting, right? Like when you run the sprint, and maybe you relate to this, like my day, I go and I go and I go, and then I get home and my kids make fun of me because I fall asleep on the living room floor. Like I don't even, get upstairs some days. And so when you're running that sprint, sometimes it's just nice to downshift as a crew and sit outside on the deck, just enjoy a fire, do the s'mores kind of a thing, take the walks, just kind of have that guarded family time. So we try to find balance. I admittedly am not very good to borderline awful at it at times, but trying every day to make it a little bit better. But yeah, and we're involved with our church and things like that. Our faith's important to us, and just being able to live a life of fullness. So that's kind of where we're at.
Now you talked about the seasons, and you get all 4 seasons sometimes in a span of a couple weeks. I can only imagine April baseball could be challenging at
I
times.
was thinking the same thing. I was like, how can they play baseball for that long?
Yeah, it's rough. And so actually at the high school level, we were one of the remaining states that had summer baseball until I think it was 6 or 7 years ago now. So when I was a head coach, our opening day of practice was May 15th. And then you would go through the middle of July. Kids would have maybe a couple of weeks off, and then August 1st football was starting and you'd go. And that's how I grew up in high school too. And so the shift now to starting mid-March and having essentially indoor practices all the time. I mean, up on my top of my priority list are things like our facility upgrades of turfing our softball and baseball fields, because like all of you, I'm sure, like the official shortage is real, and it's bad enough when you have to build your original schedule, but then all of a sudden when you're stacking games because of rescheduling, it turns into chaos. And so, yeah, the ability to get outside, it's a whole new brand of baseball, right? And the idea that you could be in 88 degrees in a couple of weeks and sweating your tail off, but yet yesterday you had a winter hat on as you were playing the outfield and it was sleeting into your ear, and it's like 41 degrees, right? Like that's same season, same drill, and you got to figure out how to play through it. But interesting indeed. We really, we like turf here, but it's obviously an uphill mountain.
Well, let's talk about, let's paint on a map. We've said you're from Wisconsin, and you briefly mentioned Waukesha West and where that is. So let's paint on a map where
Well,
that is, so people know where that is.
we know that they snowboard and alpine or and ski and ice fish. So we have a general direction here.
General direction, so head that way. Uh, yeah, so Waukesha is about a half hour west of Milwaukee. And so if this was like the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, well, no, that's Green Bay. Sorry. So if this is Milwaukee, right, then Waukesha is probably tucked in right there. So, the nice part of Southeast Wisconsin is everything's generally close. Everything's within more or less a half hour away. Madison is an hour from our parking lot right here, kind of a thing. So, it's a good spot. We enjoy it. This is Wisconsin's an interesting state. I'm sure, like others, where we are pretty tight as far as our conferences and the competitions we have down here. Whereas you could go to northern Wisconsin, and people are driving multiple hours for a conference event. So we are fortunate when it comes to that.
Okay, so go ahead, Daniel.
The only time I've ever been to Wisconsin is I went to the athletic director conference there, like a year or two ago, and it's in November.
Yep.
And Dustin, you're gonna make fun of me, which is fine, but it was so cold. Like, it was the beginning of November. I wasn't anticipating it to be like it was, but like my lungs like froze when I inhaled. It was a whole nother level of cold. And now they did say we're having like a little cold streak come through, but I
Sure.
remember getting off of that plane and I was like, no, too much.
It's funny because the week of WADA, that first week of November, is typically, I always say this to my kids, like, oh, I wonder if it's going to snow this weekend, because that's typically the first time you might start to see that, or at least it seems that way. But no, it's funny you say that, because I recall it being kind of cold and wanting to walk outside to get a little bit of fresh air instead of staying in the stale, hotel air, and thinking like, that's fine. It's like 20 something. It's cool. It's a couple 100 yards across the parking lot. Like,
it's not fine.
I have a long sleeve on. We're good, right? Like, so yeah, it's funny how that works, and it's funny how you get used to it too, right? Where for kids in Wisconsin, especially, it's like they can be freezing because it dropped down to 62 when they were used to it being warm. But sure enough, in March, if you're driving around and it hits like 41 degrees, every kid in Wisconsin be like, "Time for the coat to come off. Let's go." So
that's very true. That is very true. But yeah, I was surprised. It might have snowed. I can't remember. I was so cold.
You have cold days in Wisconsin, but the threshold is that there has to be not winter weather, but a wind chill warning, which is -35. And so if you can't hit -35, you're coming to school.
Danielle lives in Florida now, so you can imagine.
35 is when like hurricane winds or tropical storm winds get to 35 and the buses can't go out, right?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is if you were out -35, it'd be a matter of
I wouldn't be out.
And frostbite, especially for your younger riders. So, but that is the kind of weather where when you walk out, it's kind of that little, like, it takes your breath away, right?
I find it fascinating that we have kids across the whole country who are competing in Florida and Oklahoma and Wisconsin, and they're all battling these different weather circumstances and how you adjust for it, and whether indoor baseball. I just find it really interesting, and I enjoy that. But yeah, it's cold in Wisconsin.
Let's talk about the fall. I mean, you're in football season, and I looked at your schedule, and like your finals are November 17th.
Right.
Which you're hitting. Think about a baseball. You hit a baseball or you hit a baseball when it's that cold. Your hands want to like break off. It hurts so much, right?
We literally have the dialogue like with our youth teams of which bat are you using today? Because if you're using a composite bat and it's below certain temperatures, you're going to ruin it. And so, how do you go back and forth? But yeah, it hurts a little differently when you're getting hit hard in that weather. But it's, it is what right? But yeah, I've definitely, so years back in 14 and 15, our team had a chance to go to the state finals for football. And so it's right in that middle of November timeframe. And I'm not too proud to admit that I definitely had snow pants on at those games because it was legit cold. It was like 12 degrees. It was nasty. And then there's 12, and then there's like windy stadium 12, and you're not moving of the thing, right? So yeah, we were in for the long haul.
Well, we can talk about weather, and that's not why we had you on here. Obviously, we wanted to get on here and talk about some stories and some things that you've observed from your chair. And the thing that Danielle loves about this podcast is the opportunity to just hear stories, and just the things that you've experienced, and just an opportunity for us to gut react. When you tell the story, then we're just going to ask questions based off what you've told us, and some of the stories are, man, they're head scratchers of how they can even happen or why they even happen. And so we're excited to listen to your stories. And we just open it up for you. Just go ahead and start us off with a story about stuff that you've witnessed from your chair.
Yeah. So as I was thinking about, sometimes you get asked like, well, how did today go? Or like, what did you do today? Or, what's the biggest, issue you've faced this year? And I often kind of look and I'm like, I don't know. I can't remember what happened this morning. I need to check my calendar. Or maybe there was a big situation that happened 2 weeks ago, but it really doesn't matter now because it's resolved itself and we're on to the next big thing, right? So it's interesting kind of reflecting through that. But I did last winter have a very interesting offer from our parent group of our one of our basketball programs. And so long story short, we had a JV team that was struggling, and kind of the classic, Denny Green, like they are who we thought they were, right? Like sometimes I think there's parents who are just really shocked at the idea that we didn't go 22-0, and the idea that we didn't get that JV basketball trophy is just astounding, right? And it's like, well, again, you are who you thought you were, right? Your talent and where you stack against others, that's going to lead to the results we see, right? And we can work hard and stand for good things and coach our tails off, but sometimes there's other factors at play. Well, this parent wasn't really excited about the performance that they were seeing within the program. And so we started to get, myself and the head coach, these very interesting anonymous and sometimes cryptic emails. And, like when you open the email and it's not just like 2 sentences of like, you don't know what you're doing, figure it out, yours sincerely, right? This was the book, right? The multi-scroll, like, wow, somebody must have been working on this for a few weeks kind of a thing. And basically what it said, I actually went through and I had to find some of them today and print some of them, but more or less accused our coach of being completely inept for the position. By the way, this coach has been with us for 10 years. He's a great guy. He knows tons about basketball, right?
And we're talking about JV still.
JV.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, and our varsity coach is top notch. He's terrific, and so yeah, it's just all centered on JV. And of course, when things go wrong, it's not everybody's fault. It's one person's fault, right? So
and that one person's not their child, but that one person is the coach of their child.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so I'm scrolling through this email, right? The first time you get one of those, you're not reading word for word. You're just trying to kind of siphon through, like, what's the big idea here? What's the point, right? Like, I got other things that are popping. And I get to, I'll get to the bottom. So he had sent a few emails previously, and he finally got to the point where he said, lastly, I didn't receive apply to my previous email. I'd appreciate, at least an acknowledgement of what I sent. And what he wanted an acknowledgement of was that he thought this coach was so terrible that he had an offer. He had a proposal that we would, as leaders that understand basketball and want to do what's best for kids, immediately act and remove him as that JV coach. We weren't able to know who this anonymous person was. However, at the time that we put out a mass publication or announcement that said, we're removing this person from his role because he's no longer good enough, and we now have an opening. At that time, granted, middle of the season, right, he would then step forward and announce himself. and come to the rescue, if you will. And what was really interesting is that in some of his announcements or in some of his deal making, he said, I don't need much. I just need complete roster control, complete game day management. And I'll leave the administrative stuff, right? The other 90% of coaching to someone else. Somebody else can manage that. And so I remember getting a few of these and calling my head coach and be like, all right, we have a few options here. We can either be like, what the heck is this? And be pretty irate, or we can choose to laugh. And I said, because let's be real, this is funny, right? The idea that someone thinks that this would actually happen, right? And if somebody sends it once, you're like, okay, that's a venting session.
But this person is anonymous, though. Like, you don't know who this person is. So
yeah.
It could.
They're anonymous, and I probably went 5
my head.
emails deep without replying, right? I said, if you're going to be anonymous, you don't deserve my reply, right? So we're just going to let that be. And what happened in future emails was he started making these deals apparently with himself, because I was not the one bargaining. But one time before a game, he said, this is a preemptive email, right? So normally I would wait like until the conclusion of the night. And by the time I was like leaving my office after the varsity game, I had an email waiting for me. But I got one early in the day one time as a preemptive. And he basically said, he had these deals, right? Like if we score 20 or less points in the first half, or score less than 50 points in total, accounting for garbage time, then the coach steps down. Right? Or if we score more than 20 points in the first half and we score more than 50 total, I stop reminding you how much we need a new JV coach, right? So he's kind of bargaining with himself. And eventually, eventually it got to the point where I thought he might be having some negative conversations with those around him, right? So you got one person in their own headspace versus now transitioning into creating a toxic culture. And obviously we don't want that, right? So at that time, the coach and I decided, hey, okay, let's reply. Let's have a measured approach here in how we do this. And so I basically called him out and I said, if you want to engage in a productive conversation, you can let us know who you are, and you can come meet both of us at this time with your son. We'll talk about this, right? Like that, let's go face to face and discuss what your issues are. And so his reply at some point was the idea of, you're deflecting, the idea that you need to know me has nothing to do with this. But then he says, but since you're saying that to start this process, you need to know my name, fine. My name is John. His name is not John. And so,
He's lying to you now. So now not only is this person making a big thing about a JV season and anonymous, and then making like these deals up in his head, which I can't even imagine like the conversations he was having in his head. But now and he wants to be part of your staff in theory if you meet his conditions, almighty powerful emailer. And but now he's lying to you about what his actual name is too.
Yep. And so it's interesting because I think somewhere down deep, right, like with every frustrated parent, I kind of tell our coaches, like, there's probably some golden nuggets in there. They're actually probably right about something, right, along the way, or like there's something we could take to grow and improve upon. But the unfortunate part is when parents don't engage productively in the process, this happens, and we're not really interested in nor open to their feedback anymore. And so so it's interesting. So this kind of happened. I mean, we're talking like 10 plus emails throughout a short stretch of the season. It was a lot. It was like clockwork. Like coach and I were like, all right, did you see it yet? Okay, yeah, we saw it. And so what was interesting was I gave him one shot in my reply. I said, you can, let us know who you are. We can do this. If you choose not to, you can count this as the last email because I won't be replying again. And so he had some other, run-ons that he decided to send our way, but saw that he wasn't getting a reply. Well, sure enough, later in the season, so this would have been dated, like early February, so almost the end of the year, our coach gets an email from one of the parents. And it's interesting because the way that this person writes, the way that they frame sentences, the way that they describe the issues that they're observing, oh, it looks pretty familiar, And so um, eh, we received that and looked, and then we kind of thought, well, what do we do now, right? Now we know. Now we kind of have this idea of who this person is, right? And they don't know that we know, but we know, right? And so we were just about to actually get together one day and like kind of figure out how we'd want to craft that. And then sure enough, my coach went back and he saw that the email had been deleted. And so it was no longer sent. You know, you can kind of almost go and like grab it back kind of a thing. We definitely have copies. However, that person just kind of took it and went. And I was like, oh, that's too bad, right? We almost could have engaged in a conversation, hopefully productive, but we didn't. So for going forward now, when we want a good joke, it's the idea of, hey, I don't need much, just complete roster control.
So here's my question for you, Kyle. I have attended several JV basketball games, and the crowd is not, let's say, ample. So were you ever sitting there thinking, all right, I'm just going to walk up and start asking, hey, John, just start the conversation by, hey, John, and just see what kind of response you get?
Boy, the temptations are there. I didn't. There were a few times that I sat relatively close to, because when this first started, we were like, it's this or this person, right? And so we kind of started playing a little bit of investigator, and I mean, it was pretty quick in our process anyway to figure out we believe it's this person, right? And so, yeah, I definitely kind of like had an eye. But what I also found fascinating was there may have been a point in time where I definitely knew who the person was, but I'm not so sure they knew who I was. So, I mean, you kind of watch it, right? You're in a gym, peak side eye, whatever. Like if somebody's that frustrated, I mean, I've had people that frustrated with me, right? Where like they can't help it. They're looking through you, right? That was not the case here. Like I never had one time that it looked like this person was like given the stink eye or anything. So it made me kind of wonder, like, I wonder if maybe they have no idea who I am, and that's fine, right? Like that's cool. But it was an interesting development. So
okay, so the guy that you thought that it was it actually that guy?
Yeah,
it was. Okay, and this was JV. So this person's son ended up going all the way through varsity.
So this person is actually still around, and yep. And so we'll see how that transpires, right? Like, it's not the son's fault. And so he'll get every fair shot and do whatever comes his way. But it is interesting to think through, like, all right, now that you know these things, right? Like, how do you, I mean, I think I'm going to have to keep myself from chuckling a little bit on certain game days and event days, because it'll kind of be like right there. So we'll see.
I think that you should be careful because these are like psychopathic tendencies. Don't be alone in the gym.
Right.
That parent.
Yeah, it's what I find interesting about most parents that are kind of this tune is they're usually really well spoken. They can articulate an argument. They have the niceties and the like the good natured part of things. And then there's just something in there that goes, whoa, we went way off the road, right? Like I was with you, I was tracking, and I'm not anymore, right? And so that's too bad. Like I'm big on getting people around the table and trying to really problem solve. And it's ironic where somebody can be so frustrated that they're willing to send crazy things like this, but yet not so frustrated that they won't come to the table and chat. So,
well, he didn't want to be at the table. He just wanted complete roster control. He made the deals with you that if they scored 20, I'm assuming that they'd had a hard time scoring 20 and a half or 50 for the game. So those were barriers those were levels that were going to be hard to achieve for him to be able to take total control.
Yep. So it's too bad, but hopefully better days ahead. I mean, goodness, I would say I'm still open to that conversation, right? Like, we all want what's best for kids. We just might have different opinions on what that really means. So,
So did it just stop or did the season end? Like, how did it come to a close here?
yeah, I think the season just kind of came to an end, and maybe the realization that that changes like that don't happen. They're not going to happen, and we just kind of move forward. So maybe that was the process that person needed to go through to work it out of their system. I don't know. I am curious to see if we have a restart. I wouldn't think so because of the changes, but unfortunately, if you can think that way about one person, I think you might be prone to think that way about others as well. So we'll see.
But my question is, my sarcastic side would have come out at some point, and I may have started bargaining with them. Okay, if we score for the entire game, will you shut up? Or will you not send me any more emails? Or whatever you may have had that's a bargaining chip on your side. That's what my mind would have gone to. I probably wouldn't have done it, but I would have thought about doing it.
It's one of those delete
emails. Yeah. Do you know what I would have thought about doing? Going up to the stands and being like, can you guys help me find this crazy person who is emailing me? They're saying these ridiculous things. They're so far off base. Like, does anybody know who this person could be? Like, ripping them right in front of their face. I wouldn't have done it either, but I would have wanted to.
The temptation is there for sure, right? Like you said, it's not like it's a group of 300 people you're searching through. And, sometimes, it's that whole, like, people know, right? You're kind of the whole, like is that guy, right? Which is too bad. Again, like, if that person called me today and they're like, hey, I actually want to talk about this, I would, right? But again, we have a process. Like, I'm not big into the complaint sessions. I want to problem solve. I want to make it better. So, but it is tempting, by all means, to go down that road.
What was the email address they used? Was it like usoc@gmail.com or something?
They created their own email, and it was like a Waukesha West Hoops kind of a thing. Which I'm like, I wonder how that wasn't already taken. Number one. But then, yeah, I mean, it's great. Like, so when we'll get, I'm sure you guys kind of have the same, like, the anonymous letters thing, right? Like, this happened in the community. I always kind of get a kick out of, all right, there's no return thing, but I can tell it went through some post office in Milwaukee and came back through. Like, that's a lot of work. Like, that's a ton of effort. And instead of just, giving a call, coming through. But
did the JV coach know that this was taking place, or was it just the varsity coach?
That's a great question. He did not know. So we kind of made the decision of, like, listen, this is so over the top and out of bounds. There's no good that comes from others knowing this, right? And
wow.
And so that's an interesting piece because, and I'm sure you guys kind of face the same of, I constantly kind of walk that fine line when it's the parent complaints, when it's whatever, like, again, I'm big process. I'm systems oriented, right? But if I can cut something off at the pass and just squelch it so it never has to arrive to the coach, well, I'll gladly do that, right? But what's interesting is, some coaches, they want to be in the know, right? Hey, if this person, that person, like, totally. And other coaches, I know, or I can tell, like, it just kind of beats them down, right? Even when it's completely false, it means nothing. When you put as much time and energy and effort into this, and then that's the response, it's defeating. And so I've kind of had to learn with each of my coaches, like, who do I have that big brick wall with and I protect, versus who do I keep inviting into the conversation, because I think that's what'll make it better. So
let me ask this question. When he wanted complete roster control, how big was the JV roster?
Let's call it 12 or 14. Yeah.
Was he trying to make trades? Was he gonna just not play kids?
Maybe there was like
a
closet JV basketball fantasy league that concerned.
Was his son playing?
I think they were all playing. I think one of the issues too was
that was the problem.
Partially that. And, on any JV team, you've got a mix of probably freshman and sophomore, right? And when you're struggling, sometimes roster changes happen, right? Like, all right, this didn't quite go how we thought it would. Maybe some of these younger guys deserve an opportunity, right? And so as you start to see some of that going on, um, people become territorial and don't always love what they see. So I think it was unfortunately a grand mixture of all of these things that ultimately led to the novels that were received. But
I mean,
Novels.
you mentioned the work that it goes to sending it through the post office and getting those letters, but you don't write an email of that stature, we'll say, that many words in 5 minutes. I mean, it's something that has been brewing for a while. So that took some time, some concentrated effort to create the email, to write the email and have all the issues and already have it ready to you by the time you go home from the varsity game.
absolutely,
It just
absolutely,
blows my mind that somebody thinks they're going to get a result out of an anonymous email, and even like borderline threatening, like you fire this coach and I'll step forward and take it over. Like it's very weird to me
I,
that
I,
somebody thought this was a good idea. We should do that. This is a good idea. Let's do that.
I kind of equate it to the whole yelling at the official and things like that, right? Like you missed that foul. Oh, you're right. I did. Hey, I'm going to change my call, right? Like I've never seen that ever at a high school event. And so, when I have orientations and whenever we tell the same thing, like you can have your moments, you can have your frustrations, but the idea that you feel like you have the license to say it. I mean, like part of being an adult is you think it without saying it, right? And you have a filter and some restraint. And so, yeah, it's this cross of like kind of frustrating because you want a positive culture, um feeling kind of sorry or sad for that person because that's their preferred method of problem solving, but then again, like you go through so many things in this job, sometimes you just need to look at it for face value and go, that's so ridiculous it's funny. Like
Yeah.
it's really, it's completely outlandish. So
Well, and I think that's an important takeaway. We talk about takeaways for stories, and I think that's important because all of us get anonymous letters or get emails that have how we could do our job better. If we had their viewpoint, I, I started this job, and the first quarter of our first football game, I got an email, and it said, "Rhetorical question: What's wrong with this coach?" And I'm thinking, you actually sent that? I mean, we're a quarter in. We're not even a quarter of the season in. We're a quarter of the first game in, and the question is rhetorical, by the way. Then why put that in an email? That's what I don't understand. Why put it in an email if it's a rhetorical question? And do they really want me to respond?
you want to, because like if you're down by the sidelines or something, right, and you're reading that email, you want to turn around to the crowd and go, I don't know, right? Like,
Got me.
got you. I don't know.
I just it
Oh
just
man.
it just blows my mind the audacity that some people have because they pay $5, they can say whatever they think they can say. Like if I paid $5, I couldn't go to their office and gripe about whatever. I had one person tell me, Dustin, I pay taxes, so I should be able to use the basketball facility whenever I want. And my response to him was, I pay taxes too, but the police chief's not going to let me take the squad car out whenever I want to, just because I pay taxes.
I don't go bust the snowplow out for my driveway. I'd be
Right.
done,
I mean,
right? Like,
but the audacity that they have to be able to say and make that statement, or this guy making the deals with you, bartering with himself, I guess, that you're going to say, you know what, that's a great idea. I think that, yeah, if we don't score 20, I'm going to let you coach for a day.
I was a no until this point, but now that you've made that deal, yeah, I mean, yes, right?
I was a no, and now it's a no-brainer. I'm in. I just decided.
You can't,
It's just
you can't rationalize with irrational people, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, that's sometimes how that goes. But
I tell people all the time, common sense is not that common.
mhm.
And matter of fact, we should call it uncommon sense because people having common sense is really uncommon, in my opinion.
I don't
that
use the phrase common sense anymore.
That's just part of like our job, like the AD role though, right? Like you are trying to do everything right and you're behind the scenes working hard for kids and trying to give them the best experiences possible, and you just get anonymous emails like blasting you. Like what? Like what other profession does that happen besides education? Where you're just like it's just mind blowing, like Dustin said. Like not only is there audacity to say these things, but people actually believe them. I should be allowed to use this gym because I pay taxes. Like what?
Yeah,
What? No, this isn't the way this works.
this alternate reality almost. One of my favorite quotes, Dr. Brene Brown, she's talking about the whole Teddy Roosevelt blood, sweat, tears in the arena kind of a dialogue. And so she flips it and she just basically says, unless you're in the arena fighting the fight with me, I'm not interested in nor open to your feedback. And so the idea of like, sometimes like I'm all about harmony, right? I want people to feel heard and validated and part of this experience. But sometimes you don't know all the ins and outs. You don't know that half-hour conversation the coach and I just had. You don't know the struggles that that other kid down the street is having. And so thanks for your feedback. But the reason I have this role is because I'm going to make the choices I think are best for kids and best for our school. So we might disagree, but it is what it is. And so if that's your feedback, so be it. But if we're running around town and saying these crazy things, I'm not interested in. And it's maybe easier now as I get further along in this profession. I don't think I would have reacted that way in my first couple of years. But now I'm just more and more willing to say, we're good. Thanks. Right. Have a good day.
And you insulated the coach because the coach is putting countless hours, countless time into their season. It's not like they take it for granted. They're not just showing up and saying, "Hey, I'm getting a paycheck." They're watching film. They're trying to coach kids to get better. They're putting in the time, and you insulated said JV coach, but now you and the head coach get a kick out of it, if you will, because you know, hey, it's approaching. Have you gotten the email yet? Because I know it's coming at some point, and just the opportunity to just kind of laugh about it.
Yeah.
Because it's not serious. I mean, at the end of the day, it's something, as you mentioned, that when we got started, you think about something that happened 2 weeks ago that was a priority then, all of a sudden has been solved, and you're on to the next day or the next thing. So you're not even worried about it anymore. But this is just a recurring theme. It's like a nightmare that just keeps happening over and over and over again, waiting for that email to come. And you know what's coming, and the statements are pretty much, you can almost predict what's going to be said, except for the bargaining tour. The
Yep.
tools that he had.
Yep. Yeah, that was good.
I was just trying to envision myself like opening that, being like, what? Like, what did you do? But Dustin, Kyle has another story for us too, though.
Yeah, so this was a little bit different one, and maybe not quite as long-winded, but this was an interesting challenge that actually we faced as a conference. And so a few years back, we had an official that apparently had secured or started to use an emotional support animal. Now, let me preface all of this by saying, you know, service animals and mental health and people who are in need of this type of assistance and support, 100% valid. It makes tons of sense. We want people to get what they need and not be judged for that in any way, shape, or form. But that being said, this was new territory for us as athletic directors in our conference, because what happened was, without really much communication or planning, we started to have an official show up at contests in our gym with a dog. And the dog wasn't necessarily like, you know, labeled or had anything. It just dog on a leash. And that official would show up.
Inside.
What was that?
Inside.
Inside in our field house. Yep.
Okay.
And so as this official would start to get ready to perform their duties, you know, somebody has to take care of this dog. And so if it's, you know, earlier in the day, or hey, the varsity team, they can help watch the dog that is currently attached to my bleachers. And then, you know, later on, and the varsity has to take action. JV, it's your turn to be pet sitters. And
No.
figure that out.
No.
And so we're looking, okay, how do we approach this, right? Because there very well could be a valid need or reason, right? Again, I'm not here to judge that, but I also see a dog sitting across my gym that might get hit with a ball that is essentially unsupervised beside the random girl that person doesn't know, but it's okay to have them watch their pet, their support animal for a while. And it was kind of one of those things like it happened here, and then it happened here, and then all of a sudden we're at a conference meeting. And we're like, wait, it happened by you too. Before you knew it, like it was coming throughout. So I think we had to essentially put a squelch to that and say, hey, again, we understand like if it's a service animal and something that's documented and the specific needs, well then of course like there's a process for that. But the whole dog inside emotional support, like we couldn't
But
get there.
okay, but like the whole that's even fine if he's bringing you this for emotional support, but there's nobody watching the dog. That's the problem. It's unsupervised while he's working. If he brought like a dog sitter that's out there with him, this
Yeah,
probably wouldn't even be a conversation, but he's trying to, I guess, pawn it off on somebody else. With what happens if they got bit? Like there would be so many liability issues going through my head. So
many.
like I agree. Like, we've had on this show like some emotional support roosters. And what do we have? We've
A
had some
miniature horse.
a horse. Yeah. We've had some animals, but like the person at least stayed with this animal. But
Sure.
just to like wrap it around the pole and be like, stay here while I'm working is mind boggling to me.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, you think about the traffic flow, right, and how events look. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, this might be a good spot. Like, let's go in this corner, right? Then the animal can feel safe and not at a heightened state. But no, I think we're going to kind of put it right on Main Street here as people enter and just, I mean, I was like, is this going to turn into like the petting zoo? Like, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this, right? Like how to make this good. And then I'm worried too, like this is somebody's animal. I don't want the animal to, be hurt or, while they're unsupervised, something happens to it. So just many questions, lack of communication, and just from the outside looking in, a whole lot of wonders there.
Well, how
So
does said dog handle crowds? How do they handle somebody coming up and just trying to pet it? Because little kids are going to come up and just say a dog and they want to pet it. And then my other question would be, did he provide bags?
Yep. Yeah.
so these were all of our questions. Now, thankfully, I think I can report that I was never witnessed or reported as having to see said bags in use. But uh, that was my first thought, right? Like, is somebody going to feed this thing? And then again, like, oh, there's popcorn and airheads and this, that. Like, is that okay for this dog to just be eating up off the ground? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of questions.
But they didn't like say, "Hey, I have an emotional support dog. I'm gonna come. They'll be fine. I'll take care of them. I'll put them in." So none of that happened. You were just at a game and you saw a dog and you were like, "What?"
Yes.
Like, I'm just picturing just like the old double doors when you come in, they have the bar in the middle. Like, just wrap it around there and just let it sit there. And hey, I'll come back and get you in a little bit.
This is a first. You talked about first, Dustin. This is definitely a first. The official bringing the animal to the game. It's normally a fan for whatever reason, but an official who's actively working. It's supposed to have 100% attention on what's in front of them.
Well, and I was trying to kind of dissect through too, like, so if it were the case that this person struggled with anxiety, on one hand, I want them to be able to have the tools so that they can perform their duties. But on the other hand, you do kind of wonder, like, if you're the lead official of a varsity event, that is a demanding, important, potentially anxiety provoking role. And so is that the place for you, right? If that's the extent that needs to happen. So yeah, trying really hard to not cast judgment or paint any picture like that. But we were, as a conference group of athletic directors, just sitting around the room going, I don't know what to do, because on one hand, like, I know what
Mhm.
I want to do, right? Like, see it. But on the other hand, like, can we, right? Like, you're kind of asking those other questions of like, where do we have standing in this to kind of figure out the problem? So,
Yeah, what legally can I do?
mhm.
I mean, did you guys see the guy who brought a pet alligator as his emotional support animal
I
to a
did.
game, and they denied
Hmm.
him entrance?
Hmm. He was on a leash
And
Yeah, he
where was
was.
with a harness.
Was
I
this in
saw it.
Florida, Danielle?
I don't think we could claim this one. I don't remember where it was, but I don't think it was
I mean,
us.
what do you do in that situation, Kyle? Somebody shows up, not the official. I mean, there's a whole lot to dissect with the official, but if someone
Mhm.
shows up and they have a crocodile or an alligator, and just from looking at it, you may not know the difference. And I'm sure in Wisconsin, you don't have to deal with alligators or crocodiles. But if someone showed up with one, how do you handle that?
I mean, I'm thinking like we have signs on our stadium that say no dogs. So if there's a sign outside that says no dogs, like we don't even have the sign on our building because of the grand assumption that we're not going to bring a crocodile or a giraffe or
It's a large
anything
assumption
else.
there, Kyle.
Next, pet panda bears strolling into our our volleyball game tonight. But yeah, it's kind of one of those like the whole Captain Obvious thing. You're like if we have to put everything in writing, we're gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just has to be these norms. But yeah, apparently crocs and dogs and others fit the bill to come into buildings.
I'm beginning. I mean, I'm going back to this official bringing this, and if that's an emotional support animal, and sometime a crowd member gets onto the said official, and maybe he has an emotional moment, does he just call timeout and go over and sit with the dog and just kind of have his therapy moment? Or
Dustin.
You
no,
know,
I'm not. I'm not being. I'm not trying to be.
So we thought I thought about that, right? And on one hand, you'd love to say like, sure, like I mean, if you needed that, I'd give you the opportunity, right? As if you were asthmatic and you were having a breathing moment, you can go do that. However, there's also a reality that if a crowd is already upset with you, and then they see that take place,
Yeah.
they are going to eat you alive. And
Right.
Imagine the emails you'd get after that.
we'd have people volunteering to officiate. And given our official shortage, I might need to help them make that happen.
You start replying to those emails.
Here's
Well,
the, here's the link for registration for our state association. Please complete by tomorrow morning. Yeah.
I
Uh,
just don't understand, like, even if that was the case, even if what Dustin just said was the case, it is an unsupervised animal. That is the problem. That it is just, for the safety of the animal and the people there, it's just not a good idea, like, at
the lack
all.
of communication is the kicker too, right? Like
Yeah.
we all deal with crazy things, and at least if I know ahead of time, I can try, right?
Did
Like,
the association know? Did your officials association know about this? Like, did you call them and they were like, I don't know what you're
um,
talking about?
that is a good question. I cannot recall, but it was it. Word got out. Let's put it that way. Like, AD's like, oh yeah, that that one, right?
You, the next year, if you fill out the officials you don't want, dog official.
And what was interesting is eventually they couldn't. We said, hey, we can't do that anymore, and that person continued to officiate, which is good. I'm glad that they could still do so, but then it also makes you wonder, like, was all of that was it necessary? Was it not? Like you could just kind of sit and wonder in that regard a little bit too. But that's a first. That's a
well,
first.
you mentioned in the previous story about you didn't know if said email person knew who you were, and maybe that was a good time to be Homer Simpson and just kind of fade back into the bushes, and maybe they didn't know who you were, and you could have just said, okay, we got this dog here and they don't know who to talk to about this.
Yeah, I
And I love animals. Like somebody would try to bring in a dog or a puppy. Puppies seem to be popular ones. People want to carry in their new puppy into the
sure.
stadium. And I would be like, it is so cute. And I'd give it some pet and I'd be like, okay, stay. Like I absolutely love animals, but just having something unsupervised is just such a recipe for disaster.
It just you're asking for it. We actually at a soccer game just before school started. I walked up and they're like, Kyle, we got an opossum over by the gate. I'm like, what? So sure enough, I look, and one of our gates swings and connects or kind of goes against a brick building. Sure enough, we got, a little guy playing dead, essentially. And but it wasn't so little. So we're like, okay, I need a plastic container, I need some cardboard, I need this and that. And then okay, like, can we softly nudge with the broom, right? So people are like coming in like 4 feet away, like the pedestrian traffic. And I've got this thing, I'm like, if this little guy decides to go on an angry run here, this could be an issue. So sure enough, crap, right? I'm like this out front with this container, carried it like 400 feet down the way behind our baseball field, let it out, and carried on. So, I'm like, not that we have those guys coming inside, but I'm like, you just don't know. Animals are unpredictable, right? Like the dog could be worse than the croc. Who knows? I mean,
Right. And you can't have a conversation with the dog. I mean, it's very one-sided. Hey, you can't do that, or don't buy it, or whatever. And they may just do it anyway. I mean, it's man, the things that could happen. And then are you liable for that because it's in your gym and it's a game that you have?
Talk about a situation they put you in, right? He's talked about liability, but like, you're also like, am I legally allowed to tell this person no? Like, this is exactly why we created this podcast, because these situations that we get put in where you have to make a really quick decision on your feet too. It's not like you can sit there and have like a conversation with us or anybody and be like, oh, what do I do? You have to make a decision that you feel good about in the moment, and then you can go back and fix it or do something differently later. But like you just, it's like you have to know so much. What's the laws around this? Or
sure.
and am I breaking them by letting the dog in, or am I breaking them by not letting the dog in? And like, it's you have to know so much. And we were talking about all the different roles, in the weather, like 80s or weathermen. Like, you have to know a weather person. You have to know what's going on with the weather. And if
I kind of like the analogy that athletic directors are kind of like politicians, where you know a little about everything, right? Just enough to almost be dangerous. Hopefully, you have a few lanes where you feel like you're really confident and solid, but you need to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk as a weatherman, because I
Mhm,
understand lightning and I understand these
mhm.
delays going to happen, right? How my grass field is going to react to this weather system coming through, right? And do I? Maybe, because I've seen it happen there for 10 years, but not really. I'm not a weatherman, right? Like, that's what
Yep,
those guys paid big bucks to be wrong half the time for. So
yep.
um, it is interesting how you find yourself
Mhm.
thrust into the expert position when you might still be stuck in the one-on-one course on a few.
But are you really the expert? Because then you get the emails from like your first story from the anonymous email that you're not really an expert on what you're doing, and they obtain that title of the expert, and they can tell you what they think you should do.
Self-appointed, yeah.
Right.
I'd give that person a different title.
Yeah, we don't need to be canceled by the FCC because we had
Okay.
that language thrown around here. So, man, Kyle, I
Yeah.
appreciate you jumping on here. I know we talked a few times in the cohort, kind of a side chat. Just said, hey, I want to get you on here because I've appreciated your insight. I appreciate your leadership style and just the way that you're just honest and you bring that forward. And I appreciate you taking the chance and saying, hey, I get on here and have a conversation. And it was fun on our end. I appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, you bet. Enjoyable on my end. Always great to connect with leaders in the industry, and I think anything that we can do as athletic administrators to grow and get better and have some fun as we're doing it. I mean, that's the goal, right? So thanks for having
And if you get another anonymous email, we're gonna have you back. We want it
me.
read on air.
Sounds good. I'm glad to be back, but I really hope I don't have to read anything
Right.
out.
I
Me
don't wish that
too.
upon you, Kyle.
I
I
don't
mean,
either.
Danielle may, but I don't wish that upon you.
I don't. But if you do, we're gonna have it again.
Deal.
That wraps up this episode. Thank you for listening, and thank you to our sponsor, Wall of Fame, who excels at telling your school's stories and supports us in telling ours. Check out the description of this episode for a link to receive a discount on all Wall of Fame products. We are looking forward to the next story and hope you are too.